Welcome along to Matchday Live, your Leeds Rhinos preview show, getting you guys all ready for game day, and it's a big one. It's a home opener of the 2026 Betfred Super League season, and we welcome York Knights to AMT Headingley. I'm Dan Hawkhead. I've got BBC Radio Leeds' Jack Conlon alongside me. Talking of this huge game, it's been a while since we played the Knights in a competitive fixture, but Jack, it's one that we can really look forward to, and kind of a new experience, I guess, for the fans today.
Absolutely is, yeah. It's always exciting when you welcome one of those new teams to your home stadium. You mentioned it's been a while between drinks, between Leeds and the Knights in a competitive game anyway. I was looking this week, and it's over 30 years, which I think is so crazy and so unique as well. I think in this day and age, you don't often get to play teams that you've not seen in that long. That particular game was in the Challenge Cup. I think it was the 5th round, I'm right in saying. Okay. Leeds came out on top, got to the final that year, but did lose to Wigan.
Inevitable.
Exactly, yeah. But 30 years between those games, so it's been a fair old while since Leeds have played York in a competitive fixture. But yeah, such an exciting one. I think made even more so by the first round results. The fact that York got that shock win against Hawkhead, the Rhinos coming in off the back of a loss, of course, as well. That defeat away at Lee. So plenty to be excited about. Not least being back at Headingley as well.
Of course, and we can't wait to see you guys down here at AMT Headingley very shortly. But talking up, I guess, the York Knights, what a win last week against Hull KR. Coming off the back of winning the treble, winning the grand final last year. The Knights, unfortunate in their grand final, but really showed what they could be about this year in a great win. What a way to kick off the Super League season.
Absolutely, and like I said, probably one of the biggest upsets in Super League history, you'd have to argue. You know, the newly promoted York Knights against the reigning Super League champions. I'd love to see what the odds were before that game. Absolutely. But yeah, I think York stunned everyone last week, and it was a game as well in which they were generally in for a lot of it. You know, inevitably you look at that Mikey Lewis sin bin as one of the real pivotal moments that really tipped the momentum back in York's favour. But with respect, up until that point, there was never a point really where you saw Hull KR properly running away with it, and that's exactly what allowed York back in when they had that period with an extra man, got that try that got them within 6 points. Again, get a bit of fortune with the bounce for the try that equalises the game, that levels it all up, and then obviously that clutch moment at the end from Hingano with the drop goal. You know, it's one of those games that will absolutely go down in history in Super League. You know, we've seen some fantastic openers down the years. We all remember the 1-0 from last year, which was crazy as well. But what an absolutely fantastic opener. Fair play to York as well. A result they absolutely deserved and will thrive off. And you know, it's the perfect welcome for them into Super League.
Let's kick on straight on with the York Knights, because they are, like we've already touched on a little bit, they're a little bit of an unknown quantity, but they're already one that we can't wait to see get going. Mark Applegarth as a head coach, you know, maybe didn't have the best time with Wakefield, but I think he's really found something here, hasn't he, Jack?
He absolutely has, yeah, and I'm so pleased for him as well. I think if you speak to a lot of people within rugby league who have spent any sort of time around Mark Applegarth, they'll tell you just how much of a good bloke he is, and how pleased they are to see him thriving with that York side. I remember when he was in charge of Wakefield in 2023, the season they were relegated. I did a few games for Radio Leeds that year, and you know, just about after every game, you know, I think they only got a small handful of wins in that year, and it was always sort of inevitable that they were going to go down. But every single game, after every defeat, he fronted up, he was polite with the media, he absolutely could have just cut into you at times, but he never did. He was always really level-headed about the way he spoke about his team, the situation we're in, how difficult it obviously was for him as well. And I think when he departed Wakefield and Darryl Powell replaced him, there was nothing but best wishes from everyone at that club. So to see him now go on to York, he's a fantastic coach, and he showed that, I think, with that group of Wakefield players that he had, albeit he couldn't get the tune enough out of them to stay in Super League. There was a lot of players there that he really did bring on, and to see him doing what he is now with York, it just seems like a real match made in heaven at that club. He's clearly doing something right. They as a club are clearly doing something right as well. So yeah, I think for him personally, I'm so pleased to see him doing what he is at York.
Absolutely. Let's dig straight into some of their key players. And we saw him after round one. I think you could tip on Paul Vaughan, you could tip on Sam Wood. Looks like he's really found a bit of a home already at York. But who in your eyes, who have you got your eyes on Friday, tonight even?
Yeah, I think that front row, you mentioned one of them there, Paul Vaughan, but I think that front row three of Vaughan, Xavier Varr, who's another one of their new signings, one of those that's come in for
unbelievable
from Australia.
signing.
Fantastic signing, I think. And then Paul McShane, who we all know about at hooker. I think that front row is really dynamic and was really one of the cornerstones of that win against Hull KR. If you pick through them individually, I think Vaughan did exactly what you'd expect from him, which is just toil all night. He's a real toiler as a player, just will constantly work in both attack and defence. He did big minutes as well. I think that's one of the key things to look at for Paul Vaughan, is that he seems almost like he's kicking on again this year. When he was at Warrington, he tended to do shorter stints, whereas he did a big old stint, I think around possibly 60, 70 minutes.
He did 60 minutes.
60 minutes, exactly,
60 minutes.
Against Hull KR. So that shows exactly what Mark Applegarth's wanting out of him. He's wanting him to be one of those real hard-working but also big minute front rowers, and I think he fits that mould perfectly. Again, experience in that front row as well for them. Varr is a bit more of a younger sort of dynamic front rower, who I think will very much benefit from being alongside Paul Vaughan in that York middle. He's explosive going forward. He's been very much on the fringes of the Sydney Roosters side for the past couple of years. Never quite broke through. Was in their sort of extended squad quite a bit, but just never really got that NRL chance. But yeah, I think he's a really astute signing actually, and I think at the age he's at as well, he's early 20s still. I think he's got plenty of growing room.
It seems an absolute steal, doesn't it?
I really think he did, yeah. And if the reports were that there were a couple of clubs in Super League that were after him. York eventually getting it over the line. There were some concerns about previous concussion injuries, which again is you take risks with players sometimes, but certainly on. And don't get me wrong, it's one game so far. It's one game that we've seen him do really well in. So. It's a bit of a snap judgment on him, but at the same time, early signs look good. He got caught out in defence for Sawaso Sue's try, yes. So he's absolutely not the finished product by any means, but I think there's a player there that they can work with. And Paul McShane, as I say, the sort of wily old player that he is, his stats, by the way, were quite remarkable. He ran for 9 metres. 9 metres in an entire rugby league game is all he ran for.
It's efficient.
That's one way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. Because at the same time, he got man of the match, and he also got a try assist for Sam Wood's opener. So the work and the deception he does around the ruck, which is his bread and butter, it really is. I think that stat just shows you the impact that he can have on a game without, I guess, being involved in everything. Or certainly without having those physical metrics about him. It's the brain and it's the smartness and those game smarts that have always got Paul McShane to where he is. And I think to see him back in Super League, he's not only York's gain, but Super League's gain as well, because even though he was in a successful York team last year in the Championship, I always thought his level was Super League and always has been throughout his career. He's been one of those players that's constantly been in Super League but always hit the heights and always been a standout on the pitch. He very rarely dips below a 6-7 out of 10. He's always right in the middle of it. He's got such experience, he's got such guile as well as a hooker. He's such an enjoyable player to watch, I always find. So, I think he's going to be one of the really pivotal members of that York squad this season.
So crucial, so experienced. And when you look at especially I would say their halves as well, looking at the pivots, Matafata's made a really strong start, but to his time just at York in general, but not really got the experience. A lot of State Cup competitions. Hingano looked like he's sort of revitalising his career a little bit in the halves. And Liam Harris, I know, played a little bit, I believe, at Hull, but has really been a championship player. Actually, he's the McShane's experience that actually you can hang your hat on and say, if you need a job doing, put it on him. And he's also a great mentor for Deneve Barnforth. Yeah. A loanee from Hull FC, played a little bit at Catalans last year. Actually, he's great for the future of York as well as what's happening right now.
I think they've got some really good pivots. I really do. I think Harris, who you mentioned there, Liam Harris, I think he has really kicked on in the past few years. He's got some stability at York. They've essentially built a side around him. Particularly when it comes to that spine, he is the key man in the middle of that. He's the one that makes them tick. And I think the real challenge for him this year is replicating what he's done in the Championship for so many years in what is a higher quality competition. again, on the evidence of one game, I will keep caveating it by saying it is one game. He looked really good, I thought, against Hull KR. I think a few times on the last play is where they can probably improve, and I think that's when you look at Hingano and Mata Afra as perhaps not having that same sort of experience or longevity that Harris has possibly got. Mata Afra, I think, in particular, just some of his decision making when he gets close to an opposition, either opposition try line or just defensive line a bit further out. Some of his decisions, I think, might need to be a bit better. Okay. So that's maybe one area that, when you're looking at tonight's game, Leeds may get away with a little bit. When he's taking that ball to the line, his sort of decisions, I think, particularly against Hull KR, weren't brilliant at times. So maybe that's one sort of area of weakness for them in attack. But at the same time, there is a real team to work with there and a real group of players to work with. I think Hingano is your maverick almost. He very much sort of plays what is in front of him. He's not afraid to make those sort of snapshot decisions to either kick it or step off his left or right foot to try and create something, manufacture a gap for himself, a chance for himself. Doesn't always come off, and I think with players like that, that's the risk you run. But at the same time, it can break a game, as we saw against Hull KR, got the winning drop goal. So there's players there to work with. There's other options as well that are further down the pecking order. Will Dagger, who I think was really good again with Wakefield a few years back. He broke through at Warrington, obviously, had that spell at Hull KR. Again, one of those players who's always seemingly been on the Super League fringes and never really got a proper crack at it. So he may well come into the reckoning later down the line, further on in the season. Will Roberts, another one they picked up from St Helens, who will likely play most of the season at Newcastle, but is also a chance and an option as well for Mark Applegarth to call on. Danny Richardson is also part of that York squad as well. Hasn't
just hiding away in the background. Exactly, giving you that little halfback option.
Exactly. He's been in the 21-man squads for the first two games for last week and in the Challenge Cup as well. So, again, just another reliable option with Super League experience that he can call on if he so needs to. So they're a team that have recruited well, as we've already mentioned, and have those options there should they need them.
Got plenty of options, and one man who will be looking to battle Mark Applegarth and those options is Brad Arthur, and here were his thoughts pre-game ahead of today's game against the Knights.
We need to respond from last week. I was happy with our effort and physicality last week, and and I've said this too often, we dominated nearly every stat except the scoreboard. We need to find motivation to want to play at home in front of our crowd and who support us and our fans, like the loyalty they show. If we need to find extra motivation, we're in it for the wrong reasons. We want to we want to be winning games of footy. So regardless of what the motive, what happened the week before, what happened the week after, this is really important to us about how we perform and get ourselves on the front foot, at home. They hardly made any errors. They had a high completion rate. They played tough. They fought hard and they just hung on. They got down to 18-6, and they got an opportunity with 12 men and they made the most of it. And then on the back of that, a bit of crowd injection, and they just rode the wave and just had that bit of belief and a bit of momentum at the back end of the game.
So Brad Arthur there giving us just his insight into what he can expect from the Knights today. Let's just go straight into the 21s, Jack. We'll start with the Knights, having just spoken about them. They've just got the one change from last week's huge win. That John Saganga coming in for Jack Smith. I think it says a lot that actually all those players have pulled through. They're all ready to go. And actually, Rhinos fans can see exactly what they saw on TV last Thursday night. They could see it again here tonight.
Absolutely. I don't expect any changes to that York 17. Certainly, all those players that were in that 17 are in that 21. And I don't expect them to move from what was so successful for them last week. I really don't. I think it'll be the same 17. The only possible change might be more minutes for Josh Griffin, who came off the bench. He's just coming back from injury, but again, one of their big off-season signings, got all that Super League experience. I think he might start in the back row. If he doesn't, he's a great option off the bench as well. They've got Jesse D there. They've got Ollie Field, one of a good handful of former Rhinos players in that York squad as well. So, I think they're a settled squad. I really do. I don't see any reason for Mark Applegarth to change unless there's anything enforced later on with injuries or anything like that. So, no, I I expect the same 17, certainly that lined up against Hull to line up tonight.
And just a note, because we didn't mention it before, Olyfield, top tackler. He was a shining light when he came through in our academy and our scholarship, having obviously played for the Rhinos. Actually, he's one of them that's really found his home again at York. Like, actually, it's a testament to him as well that he's playing this well, and he's been backed by Applegarth. He played every game for the Knights last year.
He was one of their top try scorers as well. He was certainly the top 5, I think I'm right in saying, when it came to those try scoring charts for York, who scored a lot of tries as well last season. But yeah, he's
handy.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. So it's good to see. Olyfield certainly is one of those players that, again, he's at a great age for York. He really is, as you say, left the Rhinos, just couldn't break into that side. Might have done given a couple more years, but certainly, a player of that age, why wouldn't you want to go test yourself at championship level? We see it, across the league, I think now, with a lot of players, with how the player pool is, particularly for a lot of the top sides, like the Rhinos, like Wigan, like St Helens, who produce this young talent, Warrington in there as well. You see players dropping down to the championship just to get that first team experience, to see what it's like playing against men. And Olyfield has really, really excelled in that arena as well. Went to York, wasn't guaranteed game time, broke his way into the side, and seemingly has been backed with, he's got the number 20 shirt this year, but already is seemingly one of the first choice back rowers for Mark Applegarth. So yeah, no, fair play to him for dropping down the way he did, but also having that impact as well, because I think he could be really one of the surprise packages maybe from what are a few probably in that York side this season.
Shirt numbers don't mean everything as well, I guess. It's always helpful. Yeah. Moving on to the Rhino side, I know you guys will have seen that when it was announced on Wednesday, but 5 huge, and by huge, that's not even touching the surface, massive inclusions for Brad Arthur. Cameron Smith coming back from injury. Keenan Palacia, potentially, we could see him today. Jake Connor, the reigning man of steel, could be gracing the Headingley field. But 2 huge returnees in Jeremiah Matauti, we'll start with. How excited are you, having commentated on him on Boxing Day, how excited are you for what he could bring to the Rhinos this year?
I'm really intrigued to see what he does bring, but also where he ends up playing under Brad Arthur. I think he's probably, I might be really sort of silly in saying this, but I think he could play as either a middle or an edge forward. I really do. I think that the size of him and his sort of composition and the way that he, certainly just that glimpse on Boxing Day that we got of him, he looks like the kind of player that could play a bit of both. He could play a bit of middle, somewhat in the sort of Sam Walters mould that we see already at Wigan. We saw at the Rhinos during the back end of his time here, where he was used a bit more of a middle as a prop. I think Matauti could really go either way with that. I think certainly coming over, I think looking at his time in Australia, he played a lot more in the middle. So fair enough. That is his default position, I guess, is one of those middle forwards. But I think the size of him, certainly how tall he is, what is he, 6'6", something like that?
He's absolutely thereabouts. He dwarfs me, and I'm
well, exactly. He's got the height, he's got the strength as well, and I think we'll get more of an idea, I think, the more we see of him. But certainly on that first impression, his I'm going to say pace as a forward, but certainly his leg speed and the way he can hit a line and come onto a ball, I think may well lend itself well to an edge. So I think he could be a real option there. Brad Arthur might not have that in his plans. We'll have to see for the rest of the season. But certainly I think, yeah, he's one of those real strong carriers. I don't think he'll be the sort of direct replacement for Sam Lasoni that some people might hope he is. I think he is a different sort of player. I don't think he's got that same sort of explosive speed that Lasoni had, where he's literally just a battering ram that can come on and create that impact. But I do still think there's a level there that will be impactful off the bench. I imagine that's where he'll be tonight. He'll be on the bench. But yeah, I think he's a really exciting addition to this Rhino squad. And one of those as well that is really unknown. We saw it with Cooper Jenkins last season. We saw the impact he had, again, as a relatively unknown quantity. I think Matauti could have a similar one.
Absolutely. And the real big inclusion. We're great to see him back. Maika Sivo, absolute demolition machine in the NRL. It was 104 tries to his career. That ACL injury against Wigan in Ash's testimonial last year, so crushing. But I think all as Rhinos fans, we wanted to see Maika, we wanted to see him blazing down sidelines. Tonight, we hope, the way Brad Arthur's spoken about it, we should get that opportunity to see him. It's going to be an exciting one.
I saw the clip earlier this week, actually, of, I think it was Boxing Day last year, where he made that break from backfield, just on the first play on the back of a kick. It was a kick return. I think they got moved to this left-hand side, to the south-stand side where we're stood right now. And just seeing him come onto the ball at the pace he did, it's the kind of thing he's been doing in the NRL for years. It's been such a long time in the waiting for Maika Sivo to make his Rhinos debut. He's had such a tough year. I don't think we can expect 100% of Maika Sivo tonight. I will say that, just simply for the fact that this is his first game back. Brad Arthur said this week in his press conference that he thought about putting him in a reserves game, didn't think he'd get much out of that, so just thought, you know what, the best way to do it is just throw him in and see his teammates protect him and look after him and make sure that he can just get through that 80 minutes unscathed. I think above all else, from a personal point of view, that will be the win for Maika Sivo, is just getting through that 80 minutes and coming off in one piece and ready to go again next week, hopefully making that Vegas team, because again, that'd be a big boost ahead of that match. So yeah, I'm so excited to see what he can bring, certainly this season to Super League. Again, as I say, he may be somewhat, I don't want to say undercooked, but not the 100%, not the full version of Maika Sivo that we'll hopefully see later on this season, tonight certainly. But regardless, he's a player that, and this was said when he was signed for Leeds, he's a player that will get bums off seats without a shadow of a doubt with the way he runs, the way he plays his game. He's so strong for a winger, so explosive on an edge that, yeah, everyone I think will be excited to see what he brings, certainly in this first game. But fingers crossed he just gets through the full 80. That's what I'm going to say.
I absolutely agree with you on that. And just what you're saying about Vegas, with this many inclusions as well, these guys are all going to be vying for places. That's going to be the next thing on their mind is, am I on that plane on Monday morning flying out to take on Hawkhead at the entertainment capital of the world in Las Vegas? You know, a little bit, actually. It's. I know Lee was really disappointing. But actually, this makes it really exciting that we've got this many players coming back that are going to be ready and are going to be fighting for a place, knowing what's at stake.
I was thinking this week, actually, when I first saw that 21, it's almost like the season starts now. you know, not to completely disregard that league game, but how unlucky Brad Arthur was with his squad that many players got injured. You know, they look like a team without nine men in. Did Leeds. They looked like a team that had 9 players out against Leeds. They were just a bit disjointed at times. Those that were in there, absolutely, you can't fault the effort. I think you can say George Brown amongst them, but even Brad Arthur admitted after the game that Brodie Croft and Lockie Miller perhaps just didn't trust him as much as they would a Jake Connor, for example. And, you know, whatever you put that down to, you know, they were looking after him, making sure that in his first Super League game he wasn't overawed and that he wasn't put under too much pressure. You know, fair enough, that's been a good teammate, but I think you could tell at times, Croft and Miller in particular, and a couple of other players as well, were just trying to do it on their own, and, you know, to little effect really. You know, it wasn't their best performance against Lee. Everyone can see that, and, you know, I don't think that's an unfair comment to make at all, but they did look like a team missing 9 players. So to have 5 of them back, 5 key players as well, Jake Connor being probably the biggest one. Sivo obviously gets the headlines as the debutant after a year of waiting, but Connor, I think, being the key one in there, just restoring that spine. He's had a full pre-season as well, playing, you know, training alongside Brodie Croft, training alongside Lockie Miller, Danny Levi as well, I think was a great addition. I really like the look of him at Widnes and at Lee last week. I think having those 5 players back in really does sort of reignite them. You look at the 21-man squad that's been named, you can probably pick the 17 in terms of what is strongest there on paper. Yeah. And the 4 that miss out, just being that younger crop that filled in last week. So no, I absolutely think that this week is where Super League really starts. Shall we say that? That's what we'll go with.
I think we can say that.
Why ever not? You know, they had that disappointment against Lee, but being back here at Headingley, taking on York, the atmosphere will be up. Vegas is a week away as well. That's a big excitement for a lot of people. So yeah, I think the season really starts this week for the Rhinos with those big inclusions, with what will be much closer to a full strength side, certainly a stronger side than they had at Lee last week. So yeah, I think those inclusions are so massive. I don't think that can be understated this week.
And team news is coming up very shortly. We'll find out exactly who's in that 17-man squad very soon. Speaking of massive wingers and try-scoring wingers, with our head-to-head this week, we're looking at two, I would say, veteran wingers for both teams. Ryan Hall and Ben Jones-Bishop, former teammates, were part of that incredible 2010s team that won it from 5th in 2011, won the World Club and Super League Grand Finals in 2012. But both sort of key members still in their respective side. Let's start with Ben Jones-Bishop. Sort of nearly 400 appearances in total for his career. He's had 83 of those with Leeds. Now finds himself with York. How crucial do you think he could be for, I guess, a try-scoring effort for the Knights?
He's still going. He really is still going and looks great for it as well in that York side. Joined them midway through last season. Bit of a renaissance as well under Mark Applegarth, as we've seen for a lot of players. Scored a lot of tries for them last season. Was just very much Ben Jones-Bishop as we've come to know him. This fantastic finisher, this threat on the right edge. He's still got a good turn of pace as well, despite being in his 30s, in the twilight of his career, you could perhaps say. But I certainly got memories of when he came through with that scrum out, that trademark scrum out that he doesn't wear anymore. Actually, he's ditched the scrum out. But that was always the trademark for Ben Jones-Bishop. Spent, I think, 4 years alongside Ryan Hall, one on each wing. Ended up leaving after Tom Briscoe arrived at the Rhinos, and there was that bit more competition there. But at the same time, has still been one of the real top wingers, top British wingers. In the past decade, 15 years, whatever you want to call it, he's always very much been a try-scoring threat, no matter what level he's played at as well, whether it's Super League or whether it's Championship. He's always been a threat. So at Wakefield as well, where he was one of their best players for a long, long time. Certainly one of their biggest attacking threats, try-scoring threats. I think there's a lot of love still, I think, for Ben Jones-Bishop. Not just from the York fans, but I think he'll get a good reception here as well from the Leeds fans.
They always do, don't they?
Well, exactly. I think, especially ones that were so good when they were here. I remember that right edge combination of Callum Watkins and Jones-Bishop was so good. You chuck it that way. Watkins with that sort of trademark electric step. Jones-Bishop on the right wing with. I always thought he had deceptive pace as well. He always looked like he wasn't moving that quickly, but really he was. He was so fast.
He's one of the guys that glides, doesn't he?
That is the word. He really does just glide along the pitch, and that's still very much the case now. Yeah, it'll be good to see him back at Headingley. I think as well. He's from this neck of the woods. I think we'll always have that connection to Leeds as well, Jones-Bishop. So yeah, one of I said earlier, I think there's 6 named in the 21-man squad, former Leeds players or players with Leeds connections, and he I think alongside Paul McShane very much headlines it. But yeah, it'll be good to see him back here.
And Ryan Hall, the elder statesman, you could say, the Leeds side, but still relentlessly keeps going. Just your thoughts on what I guess he could be for this season, and particularly in sort of these next few games for the Rhinos as we sort of look to get our season going.
Just as key as he's always been, I think. He's probably the perfect example of a player that we've seen evolve throughout his Super League career. He started as quite a skinny, pacey winger. Was one of the quickest players in Super League once upon a time. He probably isn't that now, but he's adapted his game by bulking up a lot and becoming this sort of powerhouse on what is now the right edge for Leeds. His yardage carries are still one of the trademarks and one of the real strengths of his game. Bringing it out from deep, getting through that work early on in a set, and really setting that benchmark for the rest of the set, for the rest of the team to push on from. Still a finisher, still a good try scorer. We've got to say, without a shadow of a doubt, he's still very much lends himself as an attacking threat and a try scoring threat on that right wing. Again, by the way, it's worth mentioning, switch sides. He was always, when he was here, known as a left winger. That's why he's got number 5 on his back. Still does now, but alongside Harry Newman on that right hand side to accommodate Sivo, Riley Lum, Chris Hankinson last year, to accommodate them on the left. So he's had a lot of transition, I think, throughout his career. Turning himself, moulding himself into a different sort of winger, but still very much hitting the heights, still just as fit as he once was. He's got those big minutes in him still, and able to do it at high intensity as well, and experience as well, which you can't buy in a player. He's what is he, 36, 37 now?
He's getting on a little bit now. I think he's nearly 40, isn't he?
Bless him, yeah, and probably will go around again next year if the reports are correct.
The way he's talking,
well,
sounds
exactly.
like he could go again.
But I think he is one of those that is just so valuable, I think, for what is a real exciting crop of youngsters that are coming through at Leeds. Again, I mentioned Riley Lum there. There's a group of outside backs that have been so key in the academy and the reserves. Ned McCormack, another one. Alfie Edgell, you can include in that conversation as well. Some of the lads that we've seen in pre-season that are still more so academy players, reserves players than first teamers, but will certainly be making that step up, you'd imagine, in the next couple of years. He is such a pivotal, key figure for them as well, you know, as someone who they will have all watched him growing up without a doubt. I mean, George Brown wasn't born when Ryan Hall made his debut, which is again a fantastic and quite amusing stat. But to have someone like that has played so much at the Rhinos, had that spell in Australia, at Hawkhead, has tasted so much success, particularly at this great club, is so vital for those youngsters coming through, learning what it means to be a professional, to be an utmost professional as well. You don't get to 36, 37, still playing at the top level without being as professional as he has been, looking after his body in the way that he has done. So he's the perfect example for a lot of those young kids coming through as to how to make it at the top, whilst also still delivering top performances week in, week out.
And we hope to see one of those top performances today against the York Knights. How can you stay in touch if you're not here? Well, why are you not here at Headingley today? Get yourself a ticket now. Tickets.therhinos.co.uk right now and make sure that you're here to watch us take on the Knights. If you're out and about, Sky Sports obviously have full coverage. We're on the red button for this one, or Super League Plus also has that available. You want to listen? You can get updates from this man right here, Jack Conlon on BBC Radio Leeds, bringing you live updates from here. I believe you've got Bradford as the main commentary, but we'll have yourself with some key updates.
Absolutely.
I'm hoping for plenty of them as well at that. If not, then also keep in touch on socials, so at LEEDS RHINOS across X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Make sure that you're keeping up to date with all the scorers and all the action as it's happening. Well, I've been Dan Hawkhead. That's been Jack Conlon. Team news is coming next. Go the Rhinos.